Originally established as the pivot point of the weekly cycle, the seventh day stood for thousands of years as the seal of the Creator's power and authority. During the lifetime of Jesus Christ, contention and debate raged over the issue of proper Sabbath keeping. In Part 3 of The Seventh Day, Hal Holbrook and experts from around the world chronicled the struggle to replace the seventh-day Sabbath with Sunday as the Christian day of worship. The story is woven into the history of medieval Europe, and it continues to shape the customs of most Christians even today. And now, Part 4 of The Seventh Day, Revelations from the Lost Pages of History.
I am Ivan Krizin. I pray for courage to die a noble death today. I will die for my faith, for the truth that I have loved. I will die because of those things that I have believed and taught according to the Holy Scriptures, both Old Testament and New. I will die today because I have observed the seventh day of the week as the holy Sabbath of God. How did it come to this fiery death? I had such hopes. I had visions of the whole Russian church reforming, reviving the pure truth of the gospel. But now it comes to an end. Ivan III. He could not stay away. Once he was our friend. I wonder what is in his heart today. Look there. Elena and Dmitri, Sobotniks, Sabbath keepers like me. The Tsar's own daughter-in-law. His grandson. What will become of them? Will they burn too? Ah, Sophia. She should be happy today. She was against us from the very beginning. And Gennady, the Archbishop from Novgorod, he has lived for this day, for this fire. He claims that we have turned away from Christ and become like the Jews. But I am a Christian, and I die today for love of Christ and His Word.
Those horrific fires in Moscow 500 years ago signaled the death of the 15th century Russian Reformation, a Reformation characterized by its emphasis on observing Saturday, the seventh day, as the Sabbath. Hello, I'm Hal Holbrook. Welcome to part 4 of the seventh day, Revelations from the Lost Pages of History. The man in the cage, Ivan Kurizin, was a prominent Russian theologian and a leader of the religious uprising that historians call the Novgorod-Moscow movement. The Tsar Ivan the Great found this movement already well established in Novgorod when he seized control of that city around 1480. Ivan found that 2 Russian Orthodox priests were at the heart of the movement. He invited them to Moscow. Dr. Oleg Jigenkov explains.
The reason Tsar Ivan brought the 2 most prominent priests, Denis and Alexei, from Novgorod to Moscow was that he himself was somehow sympathetic to the reformers' views. And Ivan installed them to be the priests at the 2 most important cathedrals in Moscow, in Russia, in Arkhangelsky Cathedral and at the Armenian cathedrals. Those 2 cathedrals are still the most important cathedrals in Russia.
But the Tsar wasn't the only one who was pro-reform. The Novgorod-Moscow movement reached into the highest levels of government and included people in the Tsar's inner circle. The whole story reads like a great Gothic novel. On the one hand, you've got Elena Stefanovna, widowed daughter-in-law of the Tsar. And she's a Subotnik. That is, she's a Sabbath keeper. On the other hand, there's the Tsar's wife, actually his second wife, Sophia, a Greek princess by birth. She grew up in Italy under the influence of the Roman Catholic leaders, who hoped that her marriage to the Tsar would pull the Russians closer to the Church of Rome. But Sophia eventually adopted the Russian Orthodox religion. So Tsar Ivan is caught between these 2 women, both of whom have great influence on him and his court. And the 2 of them are on opposite sides of the religious controversy. But the plot thickens. Elena's son, Dmitri, Ivan's grandson, is in line to become the next Tsar. And Dmitri, like his mother, supports the Sabbath-keeping reformers. Now, Sophia, remember, she's the Tsar's second wife, bore him a son named Vasily, and she wants her son to become Tsar after Ivan, and she'll stop at nothing to get her way. Sophia has a powerful ally in Gennady, the Russian Orthodox Archbishop of Novgorod. Gennady is a zealous, even fanatical enemy of the Sabbath-keeping reformers. He calls for extreme measures. Listen to this.
And in some of his letters addressed to the Russian Tsar, Gennady venerates the methods of Spanish Inquisition and insists that the Russian Orthodox Church and the Russian state should apply these methods towards the Russian Subotniks movement.
Russian Orthodox Church leaders met at the Council of Moscow and condemned the reformers as heretics. The sentence of the council details the charges.
Some of you said blasphemy against many holy icons, and some of you cut the holy icons and burned them with fire. And you have all honored the Sabbath more than the resurrection day of Christ.
Now, of course, the resurrection day is Sunday, first day of the week. The council accused these reformers of honoring the seventh day, the Sabbath, more than the first day, Sunday. And that's what united their movement. The Council of Moscow was the beginning of the end for the Novgorod-Moscow movement. It eventually died in the flames of Red Square. Elena Stefanovna and her son Dmitri fell out of favor. Their fate is unclear. Tsar Ivan III died, and Sophia's son Vasily took his place, just what his mother wanted. Early in the 16th century, the Muslim kingdom of Adal attacked the Christian empire of Ethiopia. This was a jihad, a Muslim holy war, backed by the powerful Ottoman Turks. It took over vast areas of the country, overwhelming the Ethiopian forces. In desperation, the emperor appealed to Portugal for aid. Several long and difficult years passed, and finally, in 1541, Portuguese troops arrived on the coast of what is now Eritrea. Cristobal da Gama, son of the famous navigator Vasco da Gama, commanded a band of 400 musketeers. Their mission? Rescue Christian Ethiopia. It was a costly effort. In their first major battle, the Portuguese took heavy casualties. Da Gama himself was captured and beheaded by the Muslim commander. Fortunately, with the help of the surviving Portuguese force, Emperor Gulaudus beat back the invaders in 1543, ending the Muslim threat. But a few years later, a new challenge to Ethiopia's Christianity appeared when Jesuit missionaries followed in the footsteps of the Portuguese troops. Facing privation, captivity, torture, and death, these Jesuits devoted themselves to bringing the Ethiopian Church into the Roman Catholic fold. But there were major differences between the Ethiopian Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches, not the least of which was that the Ethiopians observed the seventh-day Sabbath, a practice that dated back at least 1,000 years. Still, the Jesuit missionaries persisted. Finally, Emperor Susenyos embraced the Roman Catholic Church and professed his allegiance to the Pope. In 1622, he proclaimed Roman Catholicism the official religion of his empire. Afonso Mendez, a Jesuit priest, arrived in Africa as the newly appointed patriarch of the Ethiopian Church. He was eager to stamp out the traditions of the Ethiopian Church, especially Sabbath-keeping. With Mendez urging him on, Emperor Susenyos issued a proclamation requiring his people to work on the Sabbath, a desecration of the holy day. That was a big mistake.
Both the clergy and the people, everybody turned against him. They didn't accept his proclamation. It was only the nobles, the kings, and his subjects in the palace were the only ones who were keeping the Roman faith.
A violent wave of protests swept over the land. The people rebelled. They refused to give up their traditional religion. Susenyos saw his good intentions trigger a bitter civil war. There were thousands of casualties. Amid the chaos and bloodshed came a voice of reason.
Fasilidas, one of his sons, talked to his father, Susenyos, and said, "Look at how many people you have killed. How many are you going to kill again? These people are not pagans, they are not Muslims. They are our people. Some of them are your relatives." And he convinced his father that what he did was wrong. Susenyos passed another edict, finally, and said, "When I accepted the Roman faith, I thought it was good for the people. But now, even the ignorant peasants choose to die to keep their tradition than accepting the new faith. Therefore, he said, I will step down and give my kingdom to my son Fasilidas. From now on, he said, you are free to worship the way you want. In your churches, in your communities, you are free.
Even today, the observance of the seventh-day Sabbath, together with Sunday, is common in Ethiopia, the nation with the world's longest history of Christian Sabbath keeping. Imagine this. You wake up one morning to the sound of policemen pounding on your door. They handcuff you and throw you into the back of a squad car and haul you off to jail without telling you why. They confiscate all your belongings and seize your life savings. You spend months in a lonely cell, wondering why you're there. Now and then the guards take you to be questioned by detectives. But it's a strange kind of interrogation. They want you to tell them why you've been arrested. They say there are 7 or 8 witnesses against you, but they won't say who they are. They want you to guess that too. Sometimes they torture you. You try to think of who it was that accused you of whatever crime you're supposed to have committed. And then you begin to name names, hoping to hit on the right ones. Sometimes they promise to let you go, but only if you cooperate. So eventually, you begin to make things up, to confess to things you've never done, hoping to satisfy them. After a year or so, they take you to a courtroom with several other prisoners. A judge is reading out the sentences. Some prisoners are getting off easy. Others are getting life in prison. Some are getting the death penalty. What will you get? Maybe that scenario gives you at least an inkling of what it was like to live in the grip of the infamous Inquisition, a diabolical scheme for identifying and eliminating religious dissent.
The Inquisition in Europe in the Middle Ages had its own rationale, its own justification. The first justification was that this life is so much less important than the life to come, and that therefore, if a person's earthly life was taken away for the sake of his or her immortal soul, you were doing a favor to that person. However, it has to be said that the other rationale of the Inquisition was not so much to sentence people to death, through burning usually, but to reclaim the person, to persuade them to return to the bosom of Holy Mother the Church.
Pope Gregory IX established the medieval Inquisition back in 1231 to protect the Catholic world from heretics and religious rebels. The Inquisition was a highly organized operation, combining the powers of both church and state. It was a devastating weapon. Simply put, it got results. In 1469, the marriage of Ferdinand and Isabella merged the kingdoms of Aragon and Castile into the United Kingdom of Spain. By the way, this is the same Ferdinand and Isabella who sent Christopher Columbus on his voyage of discovery in 1492. The new king and queen were militantly Catholic. In fact, they are called the Catholic monarchs. But they had to face the fact that their Spain was not as Catholic as they wanted it to be. You see, a generation or two earlier, the Jews of Spain had been compelled to convert to Catholicism under threat of deportation and loss of possessions. Now, these forced converts were called New Christians, and the title stuck. They were baptized Roman Catholics, but some of them, perhaps many of them, retained some traditional Jewish customs, like observing the seventh day, Saturday, as the Sabbath. Queen Isabella saw this as a serious desecration of the true Catholic religion. So in 1478, she persuaded the Pope to authorize the Spanish Inquisition. She wanted to purge her church of any taint of Jewish heresy.
The Inquisition in Spain and Portugal devoted a great deal of its energy and its attention to wheedling out these people, to detecting these people who on the face of it were Roman Catholics, but who were in fact still clinging on to their Judaism.
Some of the new Christians followed the Jewish custom of lighting a special candle before sunset Friday evening. That's when the Sabbath began, according to the Old Testament. In the eyes of the inquisitors, this lighting of Sabbath candles was damning evidence. The power of the Inquisition was subtle and insidious. The inquisitors urged people to spy on their friends, their neighbors, even members of their own families. They used threats and torture to coerce people to give evidence they needed. Hardcore heretics and repeat offenders faced the most extreme measures. They were turned over to the secular authorities for punishment. Some were burned in effigy. Others were burned at the stake, in person. The Spanish Inquisition spread its net wide and drew in others besides converted Jews. The Roman Catholic Church also included ex-Muslims. The inquisitors suspected them of secretly practicing Islam. And of course, Spain had to be protected from a storm of religious controversy that was brewing in the rest of Europe. That, too, was the business of the Inquisition.
I am Constantino. Oh God, can you hear me? Are there no cruel pagans, no bloodthirsty cannibals worse than ravaging beasts to whom you could deliver me, that I might escape these inhuman barbarians who keep me in this pit? Why am I here? Because of truth? Because of the Sabbath? I have loved your word. I have taught it faithfully. Am I to die here? In this hall?
Dr. Constantino Ponce de la Fuente was an immensely popular preacher and a gifted writer. He had traveled throughout much of Europe as chaplain to the imperial court. His peers held him in such high regard that he was elected magisterial canon of the Cathedral of Seville, a huge Gothic structure that today ranks the largest cathedral in the world. Constantino preached, great crowds would pack the place hear his sermon. Dr. Constantino was a reformer, particularly his role play in Spanish. It was here Constantino was adopted from Catholic Greece. While holding the highest office in the great cathedral, he, along with friends, what he called the Christian Church, believed Christians would obey the commandments. Obedience possible for God in the Christians. In his opinion, the seventh.
Under human, God appointed offered to him high, by other man offer, who created.
Under the new society of Jesus, became vicious after his sermons. The ancient he called him in his teachings. His friends told them they want me to, but they found that I still didn't. Officers of the Inquisition finally arrested him in August 1858. Being imprisoned just outside, cut off from his friends' quarters, from the crowd used to fill Fuente's last his death. No crowds fit in February, now the victim of Spanish Inquisition. Spain imports a salute called Inquisition began in six. Finally ended well into the 300s of Mark's Beacons. Record long losses of meticulous cuts document the human tragedies, short, cold stories. One of his Inquisition orchestras was written far to the east in India. You might get there, let me tell you. At the end of the 15th century, Vasco sailed around the South Africa and on to India up from the Atlantic coast all the way to the Gulf. Portugal quickly laid claim to deep in India. It was a new world opportunity. Many Christians immigrated there, hoping to do life beyond the reach of the English.
Os conversos, mais propriamente em português.
The converts, or more popularly in Portuguese, the Indian, started living in Portugal, going to India, especially in the 30 and 40 of the 15th, primarily for religion.
In 1542, Francis Xavier, one of the original missionaries, arrived in Goa, off the coast of India. His event people east in the Roman Catholic population.
Francis Xavier, a letter to his fellow Jesuits, state musicians should established indeed, because there were some people to be Catholics, in reality, the Mormons.
Javi died in 15, but his European Inquisition in the East did not die with him. In 1530, Inquisition came to India, headquartered in Goa, specifically target Christians who refused to work on Saturday, serving on evening as in the Bible.
Did those being accused, which those informed people in India had no roots to observe for insight?
It may be that the keepers, who had no roots in India, evidence of the local Indian who had observed this for 100 years, Abbottham's date to the very first churches in India. These would be Catholic, nor could they be Christian. This didn't prevent them from the long Inquisition of Goa.
Charles dead, a physician and citizen of a closely tamed the crimes of my enemies. Yet I have despaired display. I have kissed. I took mourns. What? I had fist again. At least one of the Christian, Zelia, and I, not way, for I trust my end uncertain.
We know Alon's paid Otabite in deal, accused of offenses, for I. His judges him from India and sentenced to 5 years as a slaver in the shipyard Lisbon. He was more fortunate than friends for defeating his behalf, won an release for a general. In 677, he reached France, began to write there, victim of the Inquisition. In his accounts that have burned the state for Judah, not all, but kept the same.
And prepare them to be Jews, their wife who their sex and propagate their crimes, and so your life.
1680, Charles de Longe of the Inquisition was the great Portuguese Inquisition viewpoint of a. You check it out yourself, a preacher. They always couldn't burn into the Christian world. See if you change it. Sure, had started a fight one out. You know what I mean? This new religion, sacred.
Luke and Sword be this that that the Bible was translated vernacular, so that common could read scripts and fit.
For Martin Luther, was the man of truth and benchmark scripting.
Luther is the sole fact. Tradition or weak or bias the spirit should probably be
profanation moved that and back bitch. Result of the we did turned to daily, which had controlled Chicago, sitters about her and fear. John Ali is what Orient's war.
This was funny before, and he was of a cult. He had maybe on his part, but not with some virtue.
Pope the only wouldn't. The France opposed strictly. Eventually, the King of England's pressure counted in 5 years tried this trend. At the Upson period at the consequence.
The first bad issue that we might do they all church traditions.
Gas fought a firm position did Protestant reject.
They try to overthrow your teacher. Segregation, the church, all the teachers point to disgrace the and blame fickle stand.
Old John got a sense that came this a lot ain't
this of ice the church is debating and of day in addition the men in the utterance back to the soul.
Planning that the church does that to interpret mind, but they can recent bishops, these Christians, then becomes the interpreter.
Kingdom still rates the church army of bishops customs.
Either doesn't get it on their war in where you have credited not where we had nerves if we know that they're not, but people are treated as predict other people could to seconds.
I could say to the bishop was
today the comprise the
as a tract for
from the very beginning, the 20 and prominent part of the threat, Sir 8.
These acts said that standing over, and they taught on Macedon both read for and the the church and the different movements.
Baptistment to tell is true on the faith of Christ and the goal of church. Both could and not for us add.
Quickly and study the Bible.
Here, keeping has a double God. We must and pray to receive other Christ.
Flicks off as the into altar. He is more in fasting.
I'll stir and read the Bible was written as a scribe. Contact unduly invent and old preacher as late as Fisher.
They run with the Saturday ship. This
was on application but here logical means determined the law. For the law to obey. There are 8 commandments. Say that Scotland, Austin, this taught the Victor was Sunday. Was him venue for Christopher.
20 is mine. This is you're well done, sword. The 100
fish. Salt The sea hours. It's not here happen. It is so. And Carag, it's lucky. The days of I-50 and Russia in the from out it's honestly sure bit ver of outside in a sustainability in ascension by
when the church of they've been more in their scripts to touch
the church the issue and some the home forts sections for appeal see English strict cable because the Lord for not a few ever for bab as a same man
but move description of Fulcrum of the 7th
so what God is selling 7 Abaddon of the 20th Theber calling upon the former
it always is hope
and see if they issue and the say amendment in 60 pamphlet issued in England taught Holbrook in verse of Sabbath
so for Jesus and today
the century did so
position that the field and God that is taken out of abundance put man at a dating parliament funding dual taxation for spend a half hour per
bad and soul yes to being of the funds
100 is the most and a for filter fake but his representative his own inner keeping cell and should have the engine sets I'm afraid my Lord people reference
shall wear out
Peter left the other the interior Sabbath